I'm Matt O'Neill, former U.S. Secret Service Deputy Special Agent in charge of cyber operations. In this series, I go inside the fight against cybercrime, hearing directly from the defenders in government, infrastructure, and enterprise who are racing to stay ahead, because cybercrime isn't slowing down, and neither can we. Welcome to Detonation Point, presented by Elastio. Today's guest is Erin West, recently retired prosecutor best known for leading Operation Shamrock, the nation's leading effort against pig butchering scams. These schemes lure victims into fake relationships or investments before draining their life savings, often through cryptocurrency. Erin built her reputation not just on prosecutions, but on her commitment to victims, her international collaboration, and her push to raise public awareness. Even in retirement, her expertise continues to shape how we fight large-scale online fraud. Erin, it's an honor to have you with us.
I'm so glad to be here. I'm so delighted that you have your own podcast, and I'm excited to talk to you today.
So, no, this is obviously we talk a lot. You're one of my closest friends and allies in this fight, and it's just a pleasure to have you with us. I was thinking about when the first time we met, or the first time I heard about all the crazy, wonderful things that you were doing in Northern California. And it was on SIM swapping. And
That's right.
We caught a case one time when I was working in the Global Operations Center, and I'd never heard of SIM swapping, and they said you have to reach out to Erin West and her team out in California. So can you tell folks about SIM swapping, how you guys got involved? And it's really interesting to see how the evolution of the probably the best task force in the country moved from SIM swapping to taking on even larger challenges in crypto investment scams.
Oh my gosh, that is such a nice intro. That's the nature of this team I had the pleasure of working with. So when I was a prosecutor in Santa Clara County, I got assigned to the REACT task force. REACT is the name for this task force made up of mostly local detectives, but also a Secret Service partner, which enabled us to do amazing work. But where we really got our claim to fame that enabled us to do even better work was when we were confronted with a crime we didn't understand. Back in 2018, a victim came to us and said that he had lost service on his phone, and at the same time he had lost service on that phone, he had lost the ability to log into his social media and, most importantly, his cryptocurrency account. And his cryptocurrency account had been drained. And the local law enforcement didn't know what to do with it, so they passed it on to our task force, and I worked with for 8 years an incredible team who likes to get to the bottom of things and figure things out. And ultimately what a SIM swap is a bad actor is able to take over your phone service. So your phone itself is completely functional as an electronic computer, but you've lost the ability to get your phone calls or your text messages. That's being routed to someone else's phone. And the reason that matters is back in 2018 and still today, so many people did their two-factor authentication to their phone. Meaning that if you went to matto'neill@gmail and hit forgot password, to get back into your Gmail would go to your phone. And so when a bad actor is the one holding your phone service, I can go to matto'neill@gmail.com, click forgot password, and it'll go to my device. I can then lock you out of your phone, go through everything, lock you out of your Gmail account. I can then go through all your Gmail, figure out where all your other accounts are, and systematically go through and lock you out of any social media you have, any banking you have. And that was happening at scale in 2018, and people were losing millions of dollars overnight while they slept.
And how hard is it for somebody to port a phone number over to another device?
That's the funny thing, is not that difficult, unfortunately. If you think about it, there's a number of legitimate reasons why we port service to another phone all the time. You know, my son gets a new phone in college, and so his old number then gets transferred to this new device he's holding. There's lots of reasons to make that a frictionless experience. But what happens is when a bad actor gets involved in that and is able to, over time, develop the exact social engineering skills it takes to get the phone provider to switch over, that's when we run into trouble. You know, that ability is held by people in kiosks at malls. It's held by a hourly employee at Best Buy. These are people who can be influenced by a small bribe or a promise to cut them in on any deal.
So a small bribe or a promise to cut in completely gets around any of the precautions that we've been telling people forever, which is use two-factor authentication. But that creates that
Absolutely.
massive problem where a two-factor, yeah. So what would you tell somebody to, obviously the problem hasn't really gone away. So how do people protect themselves from being SIM swapped?
Well, I'm glad you brought this off right off the bat on this podcast because SIM swapping is back. This is happening again.
Yeah.
I'm talking to law enforcement who's once again dealing with SIM swaps. And the truth of the matter is you really cannot protect yourself against a SIM swap. Our phone numbers are routinely available. We use our phone numbers all the time in social situations. They're available for bad actors to find out what our phone number is. And if they've got the ability to sweet talk someone who is holding the keys, they can SIM swap you. So the key here isn't necessarily don't get SIM swapped. It's protect your valuables in the event that you do get SIM swapped. So what you don't want to do anymore, as convenient as it is have your phone be the factor in the two-factor. What we want to start using is passkeys. What we want to start using is something other than your phone as the second factor. And before passkeys became so readily available, I would often tell people have a separate email address that you use only for this purpose that nobody knows about. And that can be your second factor. Or use they have physical keys. One brand is YubiKey, and you can require that to be associated with the computer in order to make changes. So what we want to do is we want to think of things other than our phone that hold the keys to unlocking the second factor.
Oh, I love it. Great advice. And I talk to folks on a regular basis that still have never heard of SIM swapping. My recollection was it started initially targeting like the crypto bros that were flaunting having cryptocurrency. And then it has expanded because it was such an easy thing to do for the bad actors. And you realized that they could take over just about any account if they're able to take over their phone number.
It's even like the origin story is even more interesting than that. This started off with a bunch of gamers, young men who were gamers and who wanted to steal each other's gaming handles. And then they started to realize the value of vanity handles like Instagram handles, one-word Instagram handles. And so they started stealing those from each other. And then they realized, holy mackerel, we could steal big money. And you're exactly right. It was back in the early days of crypto, and still today, people who have crypto want to make sure everybody knows they have crypto, and what they've essentially done is painted a big target on their back.
Yeah. No, I totally forgot about that, about those vanity early handles. So how did you guys first come across, because you're rocking and rolling on that, you guys are seen as the nation's leaders in SIM swapping investigations, and then all of a sudden a new crime comes to your desk. Do you remember when that was, and how did you tackle that problem?
Yeah, it was a really interesting flow of time. So it was 2018, we're seeing SIM swapping, that rises, takes all of our 2019, we're arresting people, we're putting people in jail, we're in the courtroom prosecuting SIM swappers, and then things started to really dial down. I mean, 2020 we're still busy, 2021, it really slowed down, and it was sort of like my life became kind of quiet. And I started thinking, gosh, what is the next big thing? Before I even had time to think, what is the next big thing? It showed up in March 2022 with a new type of crime that would really change the direction of my career. And the way
do you remember the first victim?
Yeah. Matt, the way that appeared was in March 2022, we had our first victim of what we soon found out was called pig butchering. I was at the React task force. They have a separate office that's off campus from the rest of law enforcement. And I was asking the detectives what they were working on, and they said, have you ever heard of SIM swapping? Have you ever heard of pig butchering? And I said, no, that was the first time I'd heard that term. And it catches you when you hear it for the first time. And they started telling me the story of a 30-year-old software engineer who had gotten involved in a romance scam. And we're certainly familiar with romance scams in law enforcement. We see them frequently. The first time we see them, it sort of catches us off guard, and we think, gosh, how do you fall in love with someone that you have only met online? But then we learn and we understand that this is a real phenomenon. But this was a romance scam like we had never seen before. This was romance scam, high intensity contact for a long extended period of time, really making this victim think that he had found his bride. He had really found the one. And at that same time, then she says, and she's appearing to be wealthy. And then she says, do you know how I got wealthy like this? I invest in cryptocurrency. And our victim thought, I don't know anything about cryptocurrency. And she said, well, I didn't either, but my uncle taught me and my uncle could teach you. And it was the beginning of his demise, where he started to invest small amounts, and he thought that he was having this exponential increase in the value of his investment, and then was led to put more and more money into it until he had invested his entire net worth and thought that he was worth over $1 million, only to find out that that whole thing was fictitious and the money had moved down the blockchain.
Wow. And so you, from that first case, you start doing a little more research and talking to more victims. How quickly did you realize this was a big problem at a nationwide or global scale?
Yeah, it was interesting because the first one we heard, we thought, gosh, this is a really strange thing. And then in short succession, we started seeing more and more. And we began to realize, oh my God, this is something in that, I live in Silicon Valley. Our houses here have a strong value. And so what we were seeing was huge dollar amounts lost. We were seeing millions of dollars lost, wiped out, and stolen. And then we began to realize, how is this happening? Is this our Nigerian sweatshop things we're familiar with? Is this an Indian call center? What is this? And I love a rabbit hole, and so I started studying it, and I came to realize that, oh my God, this is happening at a scale that we have never seen before. This is happening in an industrialized manner in Southeast Asia, in literal penal colonies that have been built for this express purpose, and it's being run by Chinese organized crime. And then for me, the mic drop was, and oh my goodness, the labor responsible for this has been human trafficked. They've been led to believe they're getting a different job, and oh my goodness, they find out that now they are forced to work as scammers. And it's the scale, the gravity, the evilness of this is like nothing we've ever seen before.
And do you think that part of its success is that it operates in the gap in the system of law enforcement that we have, and that our system in the United States of having a whole bunch of different agencies, both federal and state and local, that have concurrent jurisdiction, enabled this to fit right into that gap? So it took a while for everyone to actually realize how bad this has spread? Or is that just my false perception of why this came on so quickly and became an epidemic before we even realized how bad it was?
I couldn't agree with you more, and I will happily discuss that point. But I think what happened with this case is there were a number of factors, just like what you're saying, that all came together at the same time. Number one, we're coming out of COVID. We have a nation in the US, and quite frankly a globe, that is experiencing a loneliness epidemic. And they are somebody reaching out on their phone is sort of a welcome distraction for a lot of people, and especially if that person appears to be attractive and young and very interested in you. So that's one thing. So that we're already prone and primed for this type of engagement. Number two, they chose a crime that is specifically humiliating and embarrassing. And so people do not want to report it. So we have that factor weighing in front of them. Number three, and this starts to get into the law enforcement piece, even if they do report it, law enforcement is gravely unprepared for this threat. And by that, it's exactly what you said, and plus. And the and plus is easy. The and plus is cryptocurrency. Nobody saw this coming, although we should have. Nobody saw this coming, and nobody trained our law enforcement in advance for this massive way that bad guys were going to move money. So when you add in the particular point that you make, which is exceptionally valid, and that is this: you have victims reporting to local law enforcement who are not remotely prepared for the volume, the intensity, the dramatic need for these victims to be psychologically understood in a way that very few victims of crime need to be. This is a whole new game. We understand sexual assault victims. We understand victims of robbery. We understand people who've been beaten in a bar fight. We don't have a good understanding of the emotional toll that these people have gone through before they show up at law enforcement. So you've got victims coming into local law enforcement where somebody at the counter is not at all prepared for what this is. They are already overworked, overburdened, don't have time, are not interested, and it's very unfortunately easy for initial responders to say, this is a civil matter. This is not what we do. You should report this to the feds. And so what's happening is at the local level, initially for sure, there was literally no assistance to victims of this crime. So they are then instructed to report to IC3, and they're expected to report to an FBI portal, to which they're getting no response at all. None. Not even a return email saying, we've got this, we're on top of this. And so what happens is the FBI is getting these reports. I can't speak for what the FBI did or did not do with those reports, but what I can speak to as a prosecutor on a local level was there was no coordination in between states and locals in that way. Then you've got Secret Service emerging and again, working with this task force I worked with, where we had an embedded member from United States Secret Service, we had visibility into what Secret Service was doing. And we understood that there were specialized teams in DC and particularly locally under the direction of Sean Bradstreet and the genius analyst Andrew Frey. There was work happening locally, Secret Service, and nationally, Secret Service. But victims didn't know they could report to Secret Service. But then they started hearing Secret Service is a friendly, and so they started reporting to Secret Service, and Secret Service started to do some work in that. But then you've got people frustrated, hearing nothing, reporting to literally every 3-letter entity nationally, and everybody sitting in their silos with SEC taking their reports and not sharing them, and CF. Literally everybody is operating in a silo that was immensely ineffective. And even though called out and quite obvious to everyone that this was no way to handle what has turned out to be a global humanitarian and national security crisis, that is still the environment we live in.
Yeah, and it was frustrating too, because the fact that the funds were moving outside of the traditional financial system made it even more difficult, because the money was moving faster. The sort of like the net that we had where financial institutions would look for mule accounts and things like that kind of went sideways, because the money was moving overseas to overseas exchangers outside of the regulatory requirements of FinCEN, and the money was gone. I remember it was probably 2022 where you and I first started talking about trying to develop a strategy to combat this. And it became, I think, very frustrating for both of us, because you have so many players. It is really expensive for law enforcement to even do blockchain analytics at the time, now to a lesser degree. And then, so even if they had the tools, the money's moving faster than their ability to trace it. And then at the same time, our laws, especially as it relates to digital assets, were so murky. I can't imagine the frustration that victims would have, even if they reported it promptly, that law enforcement was basically unable to recover funds in any meaningful way unless the bad actors made mistakes, right? I mean, that was kind of what we used to see. Since you and I both retired, do you see any real meaningful change to how this is? It's kind of like a leading question, because you know that I always say the cavalry's not coming, but do you think the cavalry's coming? And no, what can we do?
No, so it's funny, because as I'm having this conversation with you, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could say, well, that's how it was in 2022, but now we've rallied everybody and we're working from the same sheet of music. But in fact, it is still not the case that anybody is working together in any meaningful manner. And by that I mean, particularly, I'm going to call it out, and I always call it out, there is a major gap between federal and state law enforcement that is 100% ineffective when we're dealing with this specific type of crime. And the gap between state and locals and feds is massive, and quite frankly I think there is a gap in what my federal partners are seeing in the ground floor in terms of In terms of the very human impact that is happening to people. And I know I will have federal partners listen to this and they will say, oh no, I talked to plenty of victims, I understand. But I'm not sure there is a good enough understanding of the victim experience in the United States today. I can send you emails I've received this week where they have gone to law enforcement. I just had a woman on my podcast last week who went to FBI headquarters in DC. Reports aren't being taken, and I understand that's not how the FBI takes a report. I understand there are better ways to do all this, but what's happening is we are getting a nation of victims who are completely disenfranchised and have lost faith in our government to protect them from international bad actors, which is exactly what this is. What we're looking at is we are looking at a very calculated long-range plan to move a generation's worth of assets, to steal a generation's worth of assets from the United States, and really no coordinated response to that. And it's exhausting.
So where would you start? If you could come to Washington, I know we see each other regularly in DC, but you and I don't have the influence of appropriations and getting people to really focus on this one specific, or on cyber-enabled fraud, basically. But if you could, what are a couple things that you would do to help bridge the gap between federal, state, and local law enforcement, and both in terms of communication, collaboration, and in funding? And then what would be the larger picture if you could create something to sort of like oversee it? How do you envision success, or at least the foundations of success to be built?
I think that thank you for that question, because this is something that you and I have long talked about. And I think ultimately, if you and I were crafting this ourselves, we come to a similar conclusion. And the conclusion is this: we should not be reinventing the wheel on anything if we don't have to. We don't need new task forces. What we need to do is identify the specific skill set inherent with each of these agencies and play to it. And I've thought long and hard about this. I've written about it. And to me, it's very clear that local and state law enforcement should be, if you are an American citizen, and not American citizen, if you're anybody, if you are a human who walks into local law enforcement, they should have the skills to take a report from you, to give you options about what your resources are, to be able to give you some information about what to expect, and they should know specifically what information they need to get from you. They need to get your deposit address, and they need to get your transaction hash. And they should have a uniform way of getting that, and then that information should be immediately triaged. And whether that information is triaged at a task force like the already existing REACT task force in Santa Clara County, or at one of the myriad Secret Service task forces that already exist, we should have an analyst that can take a quick look at those addresses and see if there's any means to locate those funds. If yes, great, we get on it and we move it. If no, then that information should be transferred through the TFO, through the task force organization, into an intelligence system that is being evaluated at scale, looking at the big picture. And what we should do from there is have our federal partners divide and conquer based on what they are best at. And we need to have everyone at the table. We need to have Treasury looking at this and determining what, if any, sanctions could be levied. We need to think about FBI and identifying specific individual targets and going after those targets. We should not be, I think there's a common misconception that these people are untouchable, they can't be identified. The fact is, it's difficult. A lot of the writing is in Chinese, a lot of the identification is in Chinese. It's not easy, but it's not doable, and we can't not do it because it's difficult. Secret Service should be on the game of trying to locate these funds. They could be working with IRSCI, who's a natural match for money movement and identification of bad actors associated with that. HSI should be looking at how we're going to keep our digital border safe. We've made a massive effort under this administration to look at our physical border. We've got to look at our digital border. And so by agreeing upon certain pieces of this puzzle that we will all take on, it enables walking together down the street instead of walking 87 different ways through my neighborhood and thinking that that's some sort of American response to this.
One of the other things that you and I have talked about a few times is what I think is, while it's well intentioned, sometimes there are unintended consequences that don't help sort of like the ultimate goal. And one of those is funding and providing just more grant funding for law enforcement to buy disparate tools all around the country. And I've been a big proponent of the National Computer Forensic Institute in Hoover, Alabama, then train 5,000 state and locals a year, and they are continually underfunded. Do you think that the NCFI could serve as sort of like a center of gravity to help galvanize federal, state, and local law enforcement, whether it's both in communication, education, and collaboration?
Absolutely, yes. That is yet another example of we have an existing model that works. Let's figure out how to supercharge it. And so if we are thinking that we need to teach local and state law enforcement an entirely new methodology of doing financial investigations, then we do need a hub. We need a coordination center. We need a uniform way that we're going to teach this, and we need a uniform methodology of how we're doing it, how we're teaching. I think it's important to talk about what we're teaching here. We're talking about how to investigate the movement of assets on the blockchain. And there are ways to cherry pick where things are going on the blockchain to better suit what you'd like to recover. And there is a uniform methodology based on accounting principles that we should be teaching. And the fact is, when we are asking judges who are not familiar with cryptocurrency, who are afraid of it, same with prosecutors, we need to be able to come up with ways that are uniform and reliable. And if we have different states, different counties within states calculating this in a different way, it makes for bad law, and it makes for the fear that some of the tried and true methods that we've developed for recovering some of these assets might be shut down by a judge who doesn't understand it and thinks that law enforcement is overreaching. So when you think about how you fund a national campaign to teach a whole new way of tracking how bad guys are moving money and how Chinese money laundering is moving money, we need uniformity, and it's the Costco example, right? Like we should make one super Costco where it doesn't make sense. It's the whole like, do this in one place and do it well and bring everyone there, and perhaps create another one on the West Coast and bring people there, train them, fund it, understand that crypto, particularly after this administration, isn't going anywhere, and we need to be better charged to help the victims of that. And I know you're going to ask me a question, but if I could say one more thing about it, it's this. Let's not fully embrace a whole new movement, a money movement system, without really ensuring that there are guardrails for consumers. We are walking so fast into something unprecedented that we are leaving a lot of our fellow neighbors behind to get their money stolen from them.
It always interested me when I was working cases back in the day that when bad actors were using currency, for example, they were using e-gold. And what did the government do? They came in and shut it down. Can't do that. Then all the bad actors moved to Liberty Reserve, the bank of the cybercriminal based in Costa Rica, and Secret Service and IRS shut it down. Then all of a sudden they moved to Bitcoin, and everybody's like, it's fine. Like, and I always wondered, what is going on here? How we were very aggressive in these other sort of like clear systems that were being enabled by bad actors, but yet there was no discussion. And this was back in the day when Bitcoin is trading at 100, 110. I recognize it's decentralized, so it makes it a little more difficult. But to your point, the rapid adoption of something has, like cryptocurrency, without putting really good measures in place, has cost this country, the individual consumers, billions and billions of dollars. Pig butchering would not exist. Tell me if I'm right or wrong, if cryptocurrency was not a thing, because nobody's wiring money. Like that's not how it's going.
No, because if you think about it, they're able to capitalize on the fact that people don't really understand how cryptocurrency works, so you can lead them to believe that their money has doubled and tripled in value. There's no other means that you could connect. I mean, if you're wiring money to an account and then telling them you're trading in gold and the gold is tripling, they can independently verify that that just isn't true. So they're capitalizing on FOMO, wanting to be part of this new thing where people are making money, and just people's misunderstanding of how cryptocurrency works.
So we've been talking about sort of the response to it. Like, what do we do in the aftermath, or how to try to prevent these crimes from happening? One of the things that you and I also talk a lot about offline is how private industry plays a role in trying to protect consumers. And a lot of times I get frustrated, and I think you do too, is we're disproportionately looking at financial institutions and saying, you guys need to do more. Which, while we recognize everybody can do more in this scenario, it's very easy for our representatives in Washington to take a call from a constituent to say, oh, I lost money. Where do you lose the money from? Bank of America. Okay, it's Bank of America's fault. But at the end of the day, where is the crime actually taking place, and where should we really be looking and holding people accountable sort of at the criminal level? Like, what is the infrastructure that is enabling this crime to take place?
Yeah, I too believe that banks are unfairly left holding the bag here, in that they're the only ones that are regulated out of this entire ecosystem. So a lot of people take issue with me because they think that I unfairly come at their industry. But the fact is, I fairly come at every single industry within this ecosystem, prosecutors included, right? Prosecutors they put their hands up. They don't want to know about this. They're not interested. And so we don't have prosecutors that are helping enable what could be done within the law. So everybody has something that could be pointed out, and everybody has something that they could be doing better. But the fact is, there are a lot of industries that are holding a lot of the cards here that are enabling this crisis to spike at these levels. And when we look at that, we need to look at, and we need explanations for and understandings about, and a baseline that we can look at when we look at particularly telco and social media. Those are the industries that are enabling bad actors to access our people. I'd also like to throw in Starlink. I was trying to think of a way of saying it other than just saying their name. The fact is that there are major culprits that enable people sitting on the other side of the world to access my neighbor. And that is, if they're coming through their phone, and that's telco, they're coming, and the way that it's happening is via Starlink out of those compounds. And quite frankly, if it's not coming through their phone through a text message, it most definitely is coming through a social media platform. And without any regulation of any of those industries who are largely responsible on the origin of the crime, it's unreasonable to believe that somebody who's been psychologically groomed for months on end and has no other way of thinking other than that this scammer is the only person they can trust, and then they walk into a bank and they want their money. It is an unreasonable expectation that anybody in banking could turn that brainwashed person around. So when we're looking downstream at what's happening with banking, we are missing everything that's happening upstream that needs, if not regulation, needs to be required to sit at a table with everyone else who is being held accountable and called out. And we are long past the time where we should be being polite and pretending that this isn't the massive and growing deal that this is. What I want to say to that point is, a friend asked me recently, like, so you've been doing this for a year now since you retired. Has it gotten any better? No, it's gotten exponentially worse. Exponentially worse. And that is because there is no friction on the other side. There is nothing there is nothing slowing down their supply chain, slowing down their ability to move humans. And they are growing. And the physical plants of these scam facilities are growing, and they are accommodating more and more human trafficked victims every day. You will not need all these human trafficked victims to do the labor because they're using AI. And you don't have to feed and discipline a human when you can have AI doing all the talking and can be even a better companion than a human can be.
Yeah, it's a terrifying proposition of what we're looking at in the next 5 years, because our eye is not collectively on the ball. And we're giving companies a pass who should be held much more accountable because they are aiding and abetting the criminal activity. And let's face it, they know it. And I always remind folks that if they're on social media, they're the product, they're not the user. They don't care about the product, right? They're incentivized to get you on that social media, whatever it is. Let's just call it out. Well, I'll call it out, Meta and others. Their job is to basically get you hooked and to stay addicted to being on their network. They're not incentivized to clean up that network because the number of people that are actively using it is generating revenue. And it you also have to look at all of the registrars, all of the hosting providers that have thousands of dormant accounts sitting there of a substantively the same website waiting to get activated. They all should be held accountable. There's no meaningful information sharing, despite what you read in the press. It is not working, and that is really sort of disconcerting because, in my view, the reason why this has grown to such an epidemic, and you use the word epidemic, and I love it because it is 100% true, is because the losses are being spread out to our family members, our parents, our friends, our neighbors, and not big industry that has lobbying groups that that if this affected their bottom line, this would stop tomorrow. Look at payment cards. When bad actors were monetizing stolen credit cards, how quickly did banks develop ways to identify common point of purchase analysis, shut it down early, chip and signature? They figured it out because it affected their bottom line. But aside from some small sort of advocacy groups that really don't have a place in Capitol Hill because they're not donating large amounts of money, it largely goes completely uninvestigated in any meaningful way. And gaps such as, like banks, when we say that they could do more, I think we both recognize that it's hard to create enough friction into the system to prohibit somebody from taking out their own money. You can do something, but at the end of the day, if they want to take out their money, they can take it and go to a different bank. But that doesn't mean that banks get a complete pass because they don't actively use 3B of the USA Patriot Act. What can you tell me from your perspective of what banks could do as far as information sharing lawfully to help change the game in sort of like a macro level?
It's basic stuff, actually. Like, let's start with baby steps, right? I travel every week. I talk to a million different groups every week, and still I can speak to a ballroom of 300 people and 100 know what pig butchering is. And I'm speaking to banking, financial institutions, law enforcement, financial investigators. So the fact is that we're still largely unaware of what the threat is. And if we do understand the threat, we don't understand how big it is. And what we are not sharing information about is the methodologies, the typologies, how it's changing, how now it's happening on our own soil. You're going to have a victim come into your bank and ask you for $9,500 in cash, and then she's going to go to the branch up the road and get another $9,500 in cash, and she's going to hand it to a Chinese national who shows up at her door to collect that money. It's basic information sharing that needs to start with that. But from there, I have to say that one of my greatest frustrations is to attend conferences these days and hear the big actors sit on stages and talk about information sharing and talk about how they're part of a public-private partnership, when in fact you're not willing to share the information that you have. I use the puzzle analogy all the time because it makes so much sense. Somebody went around and took 25 Ziploc bags and handed them to all these different people in the industry and said, these are your puzzle pieces. And everybody's at home trying to figure out how their own puzzle works and they can't figure it out. And until we start sharing, give me the red pieces and I'll send you these polka dot pieces, and then we can see the bigger picture of what this is, we can't fight the enemy. We can't. And the fact is, it's not that difficult. When you can see a bigger part, this isn't the crime of the century. This isn't a whodunit. We know who did it. We know where they are. We know exactly physically where they're located. We know for the most part how this money's moving, and it's moving in a transparent, immutable blockchain. If we could just wrap our arms around getting this information together, we'd have a fighting chance. But it leads back to what you've said and what you said on this call already, is the cavalry is not coming. That For a long time, my mantra was, until the feds take this on and until Meta makes this stop, we're going to educate, seize, disrupt. That's what we're going to do. That's the only thing that's in my control. Because I kept waiting. I kept waiting for the feds to handle this. I kept waiting for the feds to handle this national threat, international threat. And it's not happening. And now, quite frankly, I'm starting to look to other countries to think about, could I partner with them, because I know that they collaborate. I know that Australia is over there. I know that Seoul, Korea is giving information to the Thais to raid places in Thailand. That our national decision to not be part of this process is not just negligent, it is causing a great devastation to the American people.
Yeah, the harm that is being done right now, all day, every day, while on Capitol Hill they talk about creating task forces to study the problem. And we're doing education by hearings. And there are concrete steps that could be taken tomorrow to help mitigate this problem. And I love your point. Australia, UK, other countries, Singapore, have it figured out. I recognize America's different. We need a uniquely American problem, but who's actually trying to look at it? I also recognize that law enforcement, they have a lot of different priorities. Secret Service is the only agency that only looks at fraud. That's it. That's their only mandate. And that's why I'd love to hear how you mentioned the cyber fraud task forces being one of the places to go, because all they do is cyber fraud. So creating additional task forces is not going to be the answer, but you're right. Cavalry is not coming. We have to figure out how to stem the tide through private industry, who actually does have the power to stop it. If you turned off their satellite communications tomorrow to the internet, that would go a massive way in mitigating this problem. So,
yes.
So Shamrock. So tell me about Shamrock, and tell the listeners about Shamrock and how they can help. And what does Shamrock do? How did you come up with the name, first of all? I know the answer. I just like hearing the story.
So I told you that my motto was educate, seize, disrupt, and I kept using that. I kept saying that in everything, and then I thought, I need to name this mission that I'm on. I need to call this something, and what's something with three? What's power of three? And I just thought of a shamrock. It was near March. And there's nothing more cheerful than that green symbol, and it has an emoji, and it's easily recognizable, easy to remember. And it wasn't yet again like the organization against the moving of money and stealing money from, and we'll call it OSIG. No, it's just Shamrock. It's Shamrock. It's Erin West trying to make a difference, trying to bring interested parties together in a coalition of people who have not only the frustration with the status quo, but the interest and ability to do something about it. And so when I created Shamrock, ultimately I left my role. I retired from my role as a prosecutor, because there's only so much you can do from inside the government, and you surely don't have the voice that I have now when you're inside the government. And I knew that my voice was a good part of my special skills, and to be able to use that voice all day, every day, to expose the issues, but not just be a naysayer, but to also provide concrete ideas of what you can do today. And Operation Shamrock we are a mission of doing. And so I retired. I started a nonprofit. I called it Operation Shamrock. The concept is that we're going to educate about this. We are going to now mobilize against it, because seizure is very difficult, and we're going to disrupt it. Now, is any one of those going to be the answer? No, but we've been in a place now for 4 years where people say we can't arrest our way out of it, we can't educate our way out of it, we can't whatever it is. So they don't do any of it. They remain paralyzed. And so Shamrock says, hey, we've got to get the whole group together. We need to talk to telco, banking, law enforcement, crypto, diplomacy, victim services, and we need to get everybody working together on the same page. And so what we've done is we've created a number of different work streams. From the outset, Shamrock's the one we came into this with, was an amazing cadre of local and state prosecutors, analysts, investigators who have taken this on in a major way and are global experts on how to use the blockchain as an investigative tool, and how to recover assets, and how to teach each other how to do it. We built a coalition. We started with 85 of us. We're up to 2,400 members of the law enforcement Crypto Coalition. And together we are on a listserv, and we talk all day, every day about, is MEXC responsive right now? What do I do with this Bitcoin ATM? Can I actually seize the ATM? Answer, no, do not do that. A connection at this agency. Or can somebody go interview somebody in Wichita? And I'll tell you who shows up all day, every day to do the interview in Wichita. Secret Service. Secret Service has boots on the ground everywhere in this country, and they are the most helpful of them all in terms of, I'll go do an interview in Wichita. So that's one piece. That's one small piece of it, is the law enforcement piece, and law enforcement is ramping up to meet this challenge. Are we anywhere there yet? No. Are we a million steps ahead of where we were 3 years ago? Yes. And so along with that, we have a banking element, and we meet with bankers to talk about what needs to be done, how we can be helpful, how we can share the information that we get from our constant involvement with victims. We are the experts on what is happening on the ground in the weeds today, and we can tell you what is happening with your bank, with real people that perhaps you are not aware of yet. We also we are interested in, the fact is, you cannot talk about scams without having someone tell you a personal story of someone in their midst that this has happened to. And so people respond to Shamrock and want to be helpful. And because of that, we want to give you a way to be helpful. And the ways to be helpful are to get loud about this, and make this the next Nigerian prince. And so that means use the media. Do you have that media access? Talk about this. Do you have social media access? Talk about this. And if that's not your bag, repost my stuff and get it out there so that people understand the threat that we're under. But we'll also give you the opportunity to train the trainer class. We'll give you a deck of slides. Go educate your book club, your library. Talk about this at the soccer field while you're waiting for your kids to have their oranges after soccer. And there's also a personal responsibility piece of this, that you're on alert now. Everybody who listened to this podcast today, you're on alert. And I'm a little tired. I'm not fully tired, but I'm going to keep fighting, but I need you. I need you to help row this boat with me, because you are one step away from someone who has, one click away from someone who's been hit. And 6 months from now, you will have been hit in a way you didn't even see coming, because that's how clever they are. We are not going to stop until this is the next Nigerian prince. And along the way, we're going to give you ways where you can participate and you can be part of the process.
Although we've talked a lot about sort of doom and gloom, but I wouldn't even call it doom and gloom, the reality of the situation. We are just given the ground truth of where we are today. One of the things that was most uplifting since I retired was working with you and putting together essentially a white paper document on how to combat this from a national level, because there was no national strategy. So we came together and said, let's build one. And we had wonderful people working with us. But one of the things that was most uplifting is when you basically did a call to action and hundreds of people showed up. So if there is a silver lining there, at least from my perspective, and I'd love to get yours, is there are people, and there's a lot of them, that want to do the right thing and want to help.
I'm so glad you ended it that way, because 100% that is true. And I do not want to give the appearance that I think that nobody is working on this, because I know a lot of people are working full time, full speed ahead from where they sit. And they are limited by funding, by resources, by administration. I get that. I 100% get that. And I honor those people who are in the fight. And there's a lot more people in the fight than there were 3 years ago. And so I'm grateful. And I also recognize fully that even at those particular industries that I've called out as inspire them to do better, I know that there are good people in those industries right now that are sitting at Meta thinking, I would like this to be better. I would like to do better here. I know there are plenty of local law enforcement who say, I'm running as fast as I can, Erin, and I don't know what more you expect of me. I get it. So keep it up, keep running with me. Let's stop for a water break and then get back into it, because I cannot underscore the drama. I cannot underscore what is happening and what will continue to happen and what they will pivot to next. We have not seen the worst of this.
I couldn't agree more. And that's something that you and I talk about regularly, is today's flavor is pig butchering, but when you've created an infrastructure where you can unleash cyber-enabled fraud at scale, just wait. But the good thing is the solutions to combat pig butchering is the same to combat all of those others. And one of the things that we're trying to do is get Congress and those who have the power of the purse to take a much stronger look at how can we support federal, state, and local law enforcement, because as the old saying goes, show me your budget and I'll show you the priorities. We're not prioritizing it, and we really need to. So, but once again, Erin, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. You've been a real inspiration to me and to, I know, hundreds of other people. And I just am so grateful for your time, and I can't wait to catch up with you again here in the near future.
Thank you so much, Matt. I wish you such incredible success with this podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Detonation Point, presented by Elastio, and we will see you next week.